Thank you, Dr. Henry. Greetings. I want to take the time to acknowledge the importance of this event, the themes that we will focus on and address through this conference. I want to, first of all, commend and thank the University of the West Indies for allowing us the privilege of using this magnificent council room, so filled as it is with history, and certainly having begun and based in internationalization in and of itself, and through its expansion, reflecting on quality, reflecting on the importance of partnerships, networking, and so on. So I do believe that it is indeed an important statement that we are here. So Vice Chancellor Sir Hilary Beckles, thank you so much for facilitating this gathering. I want also to commend the team who have organized and facilitated this day. As I reflected on this conference and the task of just bringing greetings, one of the things that struck me is the fact that Jamaica, the region, really and truly, from the beginning of the encounter of the clash of civilizations, the Europeans and their coming, etc., those that preceded them, and then the subsequent history has really been about internationalization, as the territories, the countries throughout the region have really been fought over and exploited, populated, but all from an international perspective. Subsequent to independence, we have had the opportunity to define for ourselves, but we continue critically as small island developing states to be challenged by the ways in which we grow, develop, relate with each other, and certainly for higher education, the issue of internationalization is critical. Next week, in Cartagena, India, CELAC, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean Nations, will gather. And one of the things that they wish to do is to affirm a declaration on higher education, along with a parallel roadmap on higher education. Among the emphases of the draft declaration are the following: higher education as a fundamental right and public good, peace, democracy and social integration, sustainable cooperation, and a particular emphasis, yes, part of the region, but on higher education in the Caribbean, acknowledging the fragility of many of the systems of the member states in this sub-region. But internationalization is also on its agenda, and we will, as we reflect, look to the whole matter of implementing the regional agreement on the mutual recognition of degrees, qualifications, harmonizing quality assurance systems across the region, to consolidate inter-CELAC mobility for students, faculty, researchers, and staff, linking internationalization to research, outreach, and social engagement. There is, of course, the engagement with other regions, the global perspective. How do we engage these communities outside the Caribbean and Latin America to the benefit of the tertiary education systems in Jamaica and across the Caribbean? These are similar to the mandates, these are similar to the emphases being pursued by UNESCO's International Institute for Higher Education in Latin America and the Caribbean, IASALC. They recently, at the United Nations Summit on Sustainability, held a side event on the Higher Education Sustainability Initiative. And thus, even whilst separated from the emphases here on internationalization, we cannot ignore the critical focus on sustainability. These are what we are about today. Certainly, even if we move from those global and larger philosophical issues, the main thing, and I'm reminded how well it was stated, Sir Hilary, with respect to your strategic vision, establish the quality, establish the brand, establish the partnerships, and then monetize. How do we recoup on the investment in our tertiary education systems? So this also, filter lucre, as the Bible puts it, is what we also have to be about. The extent to which we might be able to establish partnerships that redound to the benefit of our systems, strengthen our institutions, and thus speak to the whole matter of viability and sustainability. So we begin today, we will continue, and certainly the Jamaica Tertiary Education Commission that I lead is more than happy and delighted to be facilitating, leading this dialogue. And we certainly look forward to continuing the partnership so that we together might receive and achieve optimal outcomes. So thank you. I look forward to this day and what it holds.
Thank you, Dr. Black. Next we'll hear from Mr. Franklin Bennett, chairperson of the conference organizing committee. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Bennett to share his remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, good morning. On behalf of the conference's planning committee, which is a subset of Jamaica Tertiary Education Commission's Internationalisation and Standards Committee, it is my great pleasure to share remarks at today's International Conference on advancing higher education, internationalization amid global policy shifts. We are honored to host you, whether you have joined us virtually or the small number of us in person here, for what promises to be a rich and thought-provoking day of dialogue, learning, and collaboration. Although our time today is brief, the issues we are tackling are anything but small. Internationalization has become a defining feature of tertiary as well as higher education in the 21st century, reshaping curricula, driving cross-border collaboration, and challenging institutions to prepare students for an increasingly interconnected and complex world. This one-day conference brings together scholars, educators, policymakers, and administrators to explore how we can deepen and broaden our approaches to internationalization, making them more inclusive, more strategic, and more responsive to global challenges. Our program today is intentionally focused and dynamic. You'll hear from leading voices in the field, engage in thematic sessions, and hopefully leave with new insights, renewed inspiration, and meaningful connections. We believe that this will make you poised for the follow-up conference in 2026. I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank our speakers, discussants, moderators, and participants. Your willingness to share your experiences and expertise is what makes this event valuable. I would like to acknowledge the efforts of the entire planning team, our institutional partners, and the many hands behind the scenes who have worked tirelessly to bring this event to life. As we move into the day's program, I encourage you to fully engage. That is, ask questions, share your perspectives, and connect with colleagues. Internationalization is, after all, about building bridges. Let this day be one of shared purpose, open dialogue, and collective vision. I wish all of us a productive and enriching conference. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. We now invite Mrs. Noda Seymour Hall. She is Director of International Relations and the Qualifications Division at J-TEC. She will be sharing with us brief remarks on measuring internationalization. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Seymour Hall to the lecture.
Thank you so much. global higher education is increasingly interconnected, as we all know. It is internationalization that drives quality, relevance, and competitiveness. Measurement is key to decision making. Now, why does measurement matter? It matters because it aligns national higher education systems with global trends. It identifies strengths, gaps, and opportunities, and it strengthens institutional accountability and visibility. It also supports policy, development, and funding priorities. Now, when we think about internationalization, there are two levels of measurement that are absolutely critical: the system level and the institutional level. The Jamaica Tertiary Education Commission is embarking on a plan to ensure that a comprehensive survey is done on internationalization. This will be evidence-based, comparable, and policy relevant. And as we discussed today, the importance of ensuring that we are able to navigate policy shifts globally, this is very critical. Now, when we think of the system level, we're going to be looking at mobility, inbound, outbound, research collaboration, networks and partnerships, policies and strategies, alignment with international conventions, quality assurance and recognition tools. We already know that in terms of internationalization, we have started the work on a strategy. But of course, we'll need continued programs and initiatives for internationalization. Some of the quality tools that we already have in place in Jamaica includes clear quality assurance as well as qualifications recognition roles established. We also have been facilitating student exchanges through our NQFJ. How so? We have recently designed a national credit transfer system that is going to prove useful to this. In Jamaica, diploma supplements are in use. For example, our transcripts provide ease of use to all our students. We are in the process of ratifying the Regional Convention on the Recognition of Qualifications in Higher Education, as well as the Global Convention. And a National Information Center for the tertiary education system will be established. Through the many entities that represent the tertiary education, we have gained membership in various organizations supporting internationalization. We've also been signing memoranda that are critical for our joint research projects. In terms of networks, we have joined several networks, including CARICOM, Commonwealth of Learning, UNESCO, and we're active participants. For example, in terms of Latin America and the Caribbean, we helped to design a regional manual for recognition. We're active participants in the micro-credentialing system that is being designed for CARICOM. And there is significant work yet to do. At the institutional level, we want to see our institutions measuring these important indicators that we are looking at. We also want to see as well all of our institutions meeting the benchmarks that show that, yes, they are increasing their efforts at internationalization, student and staff mobility, curriculum and global learning, which, by the way, our NQFJ, the learning outcomes are going to be reviewed to ensure that we have sustainability education included, and of course, ensuring that digital transformation takes center stage in what we do. Research collaboration, institutional networks and agreements, community and social engagement, governance, leadership, and budgeting. These are all critical areas that we'll be measuring, and we encourage all our institutions in Jamaica and across the region to measure. Already through our annual survey, we've seen that 50% of our institutions have a student exchange program, and just about 58% have an internationalization strategy. Also, the total number of foreign students enrolled across institutions is approximately 681 students. based on our survey respondents, and that represents only 1% of our total student population. Globally, we are seeing averages of like 5%. In terms of research collaborations, just over half, 54% of our institutions engage in joint research projects with other institutions, and approximately 61% of the partnerships are with local institutions. In terms of institutional networks, we are seeing where most of our institutions are collaborating, but most of the collaboration is local. And so we know that these areas are critical. Mobility encourages the circulation of knowledge. It encourages transfer, research, innovation, and global competitiveness. Policies are important for integration of internationalization, and governance ensures that we can maintain institutionally whatever we develop. And so as we move forward, we'll ensure that our surveys are used to identify funding gaps and investment priorities, as well as establish benchmarks, inform national higher education strategies, and align with our global partners. And we'll be using our data to ensure that our country is better and we're able to allocate resources strategically and inform quality assurance mechanisms, as well as to design institutional and national roadmaps. And so, measuring internationalization, it's not just optional, it's critical. It will enable Jamaica and the region to be more strategic. And we look forward to all our institutions participating in our surveys, as well as monitoring and evaluating their own role when it comes to this critical aspect of our higher education system. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Hall. It is now my distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies. Sir Hilary is a distinguished historian, visionary leader, and one of the Caribbean's foremost voices on education, equity, and global development. His work has shaped regional higher education policy and strengthened the UWI's standing as a world-class institution with deep Caribbean roots. This morning, he will speak on the topic Caribbean higher education leadership and global policy shifts. Presenting Professor Sir Hilary Beckles.
Very good morning, everyone. Tremendous honor to be a part of this very important conversation. It's a conversation in which maybe I have overexposed myself by going beyond the water margin, but I feel strongly about it. I thank our hosts for convening us to have this dialogue, and I speak in support of all of what you have heard thus far from our colleagues at the head table. If you look around this room, and you will see a number of images of some of the most international scholars and professionals. These images speak to the journey of our university in these past 70 plus years. Beginning with Sir Arthur Lewis, our first Vice Chancellor, back in the early 1960s, to a peasant like myself occupying that position. But the peasantry is important. I begin there because where your feet take you is precisely where your mind goes. Yes, I'm a product of a plantation village in rural Barbados. And like all of the children in that village, we walked to school barefooted because that was the world that was assigned to us. But where your feet take you is where your mind goes. From that village, I was wind rushed into Britain. And many of our parents and grandparents were so wind rushed. A great deal has been said about the wind rushed parents, but very little is said about the wind rushed children. So, yes, we were wind rushed as children into the British cities and into their educational systems, and we had to survive that. Then we go into the world. Based on a chosen profession, we go into the world, and there you go again. Half of my family went off to the UK. The others felt that the UK was too measly and miserable and racist, and didn't stay very long and moved to Canada and the United States in the cycle. I followed that journey, and then I found myself back in Africa from whence I came. So there you go. My feet have taken me all over the world, and I am back to source. What kind of mind, therefore, has an experience of that nature and is now asked to speak about internationalization and globalization? That is how I have been living most of my professional life. And it's an honor to speak in this chamber, because when I came to this campus in 1979 to begin my teaching career, I was 23 years old. And I was straight out of graduate school, and all of the things I learned about university education I learned in this room. For 40 plus years, I've heard many conversations in this room from all of these people who are occupying these walls. So we have been in the belly of it. And I wish to say something also about the interchangeable use of the word internationalization and globalization. They are indeed quite different. Similarities. Internationalization is precisely what it says. Relations between nations. But what we are speaking about today is much more than relations between nations. We are speaking about relations between communities, institutions, companies, corporations, villagers in different parts of the world. We are speaking about the level of communication beneath and above internationalization. We are talking about globalization. And that is something, as I said, that exists above and beyond the concepts of internation. It is very different, and I will give you an example of that as a metaphor. West Indies cricket rose up to the pinnacle of international cricket, internation cricket, the nations that played each other. And we rose from the bottom to the top of that. And then came globalization. So we had mastered internationalization, and the West Indian nation became the number one after 60 years of effort. But then came globalization, which is the relations between companies, marketplaces, beyond the nation. Company cricket, franchise cricket, all kinds of different kinds of activity that was globalization, moving skills from one place to another, paying that skill above and beyond the nation states. In fact, the nations had nothing to do with it. And that is when we fell. So we mastered internationalization, and we have become the victims of globalization. So now we are the only nation in the world that cannot put our best team on the field to represent our nation, because our skills are global, and we have a team that is our nation team, and our nation team is second class. But our global skills are out there in the world market. So we have to understand how these dynamics work, and our university and all of our institutions are subject to those very same forces. So let me say something, therefore, about higher education, especially because it is a multi-textured, multi-layered set of forces that are all connected to the conversation about development. It's about development. We are mobilizing our institutions, our intellect, our capacities to build up our development potential. So this is about the development of our societies, our economies. Not just the economies, because while we want economic growth, we also want social growth. We want cultural growth. How do you define it? Your economy might be growing 10, 15% per year, but if you can't walk the streets in peace, you have not had the development you need. If the most vulnerable citizens, let us say elderly women, who probably are our most vulnerable citizens, if they cannot go in the park on a Sunday afternoon at picnic without being robbed and so on, then you don't have development. So we are speaking about social development, development of our intellects, of our consciousness, of our character, our personality. That is development also, as well as the material dimensions of the economy and its infrastructures. So we know one thing. It used to be said that capital shortage is the main source of our underdevelopment, that our potential to grow our economies has to do with a shortage of capital. Nothing can be further from the truth. Our undeveloped nature has little to do with capital and the shortage of capital. It has far more to do. It has far more to do with the lack of social growth. How many of our citizens have had the benefits of higher education? How many of our people have been invested in to build up their skills and their professional competencies and to go out there and to do remarkable, innovative things? We are at the bottom of our hemisphere. If you consider the percentage of our young people who are currently involved in higher education, professional development, management training, skills advancement, we are at the bottom of our hemisphere. And UNESCO's information is clear. If you take this hemisphere from Alaska down to Argentina, and you take that age cohort, 18 to 30, and you measure the percentage of them who are in these relationships. In the English-speaking Caribbean, not just the Caribbean, in the English-speaking Caribbean, we are at the bottom of that pile. The French Caribbean is ahead, the Dutch Caribbean is ahead, the Spanish Caribbean is ahead. We are at the bottom of a hemisphere. Now, if it is true, and every economic model has shown this, that you cannot have economic development or social development without a revolution in your higher education trajectories. If that is true, whichever model you use, if you use a capitalist model, a market economy model, neoliberal model, if you use socialism, if you use communism, whichever paradigm you use, you still have to revolutionize the number of people involved in these issues. We are here in Jamaica, and I have no doubt. I'm an economic historian. I've looked at the economy of Jamaica over the last 300 years. I've looked at the regional economy over the last 300 years, and there is no doubt. What is holding back this nation, this community of remarkably energetic people, 3 million people full of energy, creativity, what is holding back this nation is not a shortage of capital. It's a shortage of education within the community, because we have not invested enough in the people who are responsible for taking the nation forward. This is why we hear stories such as only 17% of the labor force in Jamaica is certified in one way or another. And we need to get to the root of that. We have to ask why. Why have governments been reluctant to revolutionize access to education in the country? Then you go into very interesting sociological arguments. Racism, still operational. Addiction to cheap labor, still operational. Cheap labor paradigm. Private sector have an addiction to that. Even the government sector has an addiction to that. You educate that mass of people, wages rise, GDP rises, and of course then you get transformation. This is the moment for these conversations to be interlinked. When I was the principal at the Barbados campus, Cave Hill, the government asked us to come up with a strategy to transform education for development. That was Owen Arthur, because he was a brilliant economist. We came up with a concept that by 2035, every household in Barbados must have at least one university graduate. We had 148,000 households, and we went about that strategy. We grew the enrollment from 2,000 to 10,000 on the campus to pursue that objective. We had a prime minister who said, you find the money in the private sector to build the plant, build lecture theaters, conference rooms, more facilities. You find the money to do that, and I will pay for every student. And we will pay 100% the fees for every student who matriculates and admitted. We had the development paradigm. In that process, the Barbados economy began to grow 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8%, driven by higher education and the impact of it, because we know for each graduate that comes out of a system, they get their mortgages, they get their higher jobs, they pay more taxes, and before you know it, there's more revenue taking place in the economy. And all of that is interlinked. So how do we put that together now? Because we are concerned not only about globalization, but we are concerned about the development of our societies and our economies. The first phase of internationalization, unfortunately, was a two-way street in which the institutions of the Western world, the hemisphere, North America and Europe, pulled out our bright and best. So we had a significant migration of our young people, the brightest and the best, and they were heading off to British universities, they were heading off to American universities. And that was a reality of the history. Of course, we celebrated all of that. We celebrated it because for us, in our colonial consciousness, a Rhodes Scholarship was the highest echelon of intellectual development. All of that nonsense we absorbed, and we took it into our hearts. So therefore, you get your best and brightest, and off they go to another institution because we believe in that internationalization, which had within it all of the ideologies of colonization. All of those things were built into it. On the one hand, yes, but on the other hand, okay. So then we had the other process where those countries were sending institutions into the Caribbean to dump inferior products upon our citizens. And thus we have all of these offshore institutions poured into the Caribbean. The Caribbean became the world's largest frontier for academic dumping. And we know that. We went through the GATS agreements. All of our countries signed the GATT protocols, setting standards for those institutions to reach before they can deliver. But most of them, through intergovernment relations, allowed inferior institutions to come in. And thus we had all of the dumping stuff going on. And that was how we allowed our citizens to experience higher education, while our institutions themselves, our indigenous institutions, were beginning to crumble by lack of funding and lack of support. I can speak to this with statistical accuracy because I know that when I joined this university in 1979, I would enter into budget discussions in this very room as a young person. The governments of the region were funding the UWI 90% of our operational budget. Here I am now, 46 years later, and our governments are funding only 45% of the university's operational budget. So in other words, our collective governments are now funding half of what they were funding 45, 46 years ago. So, okay, so has the governments of the region retreated from this paradigm? Have they retreated from this notion of investing in tertiary? The answer to those questions, I think, are the reasons why UWI decided to become globalized and to go aggressively into the global agenda, because we could not live and cannot survive on our resource base. And I do not believe that there's a shortage of financial resources in this region for education. It's a choice that is taken. It's a choice that is made. If you have $10, you have to decide how you're going to spend it. And if you say, well, I'm going to give $1 to education, then I'm going to give dollars to the other place, it's your choice. It is not a shortage. It's not an absolute shortage. It's a relative shortage. And it's a choice that is made based on the paradigm of development that you have chosen as a people and as a government. And so, fine, I was asked to take responsibility for this institution 10 years ago, and we read the tea leaves, we understood the environment, and this is important because you have to read your environment very skillfully. You have to drill down and study all aspects of it, the consciousness of politicians, the consciousness of corporate leaders, the consciousness of people in the villages and those who are trapped historically in institutions we call ghettos. You have to understand all of those things and the relationships between them, and then out of that analysis you have to make a decision. And so we decided that the global frontier is where we must go. There was a sense, no doubt, that our university was buckling under the weight of the budget cuts. There was a sense in which all of our economies in the region had fallen on the doors of the IMF. The IMF had articulated that investments in public health and higher education was a luxury that you cannot afford. It was considered to be a luxury that unless you have profits in your national balance sheets, you have to get away from those. You put your hat higher than you can reach. And thus, under all of these IMF and World Bank arrangements, higher education was slashed. And public health, all connected, because the hospitals and the medical faculties are all part of us. And so the university was buckling under the impact of those international relationships of economic partnering. How do we get around that? We had to get around that. We cannot be victims of these external situations. How do we develop something beyond your budget base? If you live on your budget, you will die on it. You will wither on it. If you are totally dependent, if you stay on that budgetary vine, you will wither on that vine and you will dry up and you will implode. So therefore, you have to create a context where you pursue resources beyond your domestic budgets. And that is as clear as night. That is as clear as night. If you don't do that, what will happen is that you will have collapse in morale within your institutions. Then you will find that research is not being done. Then you will find that teaching is being effective. Then you will find that the plant and the infrastructure is falling apart, buildings that are not being renovated and mildew on the walls, and before you know it, the grass is up to your knees, and your students are in an environment that is derelict. And that derelict eviction is absolutely guaranteed to create a mental attitude among your students. Lack of care, lack of support. So you have to address those questions. Now, we decided at UWI that we could not allow that to happen to us, and therefore we decided to build on our legacy, the legacy of all of these great people, build on this legacy and go aggressively into the global world to rebuild the reputation and ultimately the revenue of this university. There was tremendous resistance, and it's important to understand this because development is not a straight line. It's a zigzag because there's always opposition. And we had tremendous opposition within UE. Many people had become comfortable and easygoing and 9-to-5 job and so on. A university cannot operate in that ethos. It has to have something called commitment, where people commit to it beyond the budget. Yes, you can go elsewhere and make more money. Of course you can. You can go to another university and increase your salary by 100%, 200%. Yes, you can do that. So the temptation of global is always in front of you, and global is attractive. Academics were faced with that, our administrators. We had to take a fresh guard and build commitment. Now, we are here in this institution, in this region. We are here for a purpose. We are here for a purpose. And that purpose is embedded in our roots. Know your roots. UE emerged out of the People's Revolution of the 1930s. In the 1930s, when the working class people and some of the middle-class allies revolted against colonization. We are tired of being colonized. We want independence. We want nationhood. And the masses of people, right across, from Belize in 34 through to St. Kitts in 35, down through the Windward Islands in 36, down to Barbados in 37, back to Jamaica in 38, all of the workers revolted against colonization. And out of that struggle, what was on the table was Marcus Garvey's proposal: we need a university of higher education in our region to take our people forward. And thus, the origins of UWI, 1948. Now, so if our roots came out of that struggle, and if we in the leadership are not in that struggle, then we would have betrayed the roots of the institution. So we had to know our source. Where did we come from? We came from a struggle, and therefore we have to continue to be in that struggle. So we go global. We go global. We had some divisions. We had to stand against them. We had to articulate the history. Fortunately, we were coming against the background of people like Rex Nettleford, Sir Arthur Lewis, all of these great international people. We had to draw upon their philosophies and their strength. And so we went out there and started to build partnerships. Partnerships. Now, the word was used before this morning, and critically, globalization is a highly competitive process. It's beyond the nation, as I said. It's institutions fighting for their space in that global network. And they don't have time for your narrative. So it's dog eat dog. There are over 35,000 universities in the world, and they're all fighting for a share of students, of resources, of grant funding, and all of those other resources. Highly, highly competitive. So how do you counter that? You cannot compete in that space. Coming from the global south, post-colonial, you cannot compete in that space. What you can do is to build a narrative of partnerships, right? Shared values, because not every institution out there is in the wild, wild west, running over who they can. There are some institutions out there that still have a sense of moral responsibility for higher education. So we identified all of those universities that had a different philosophy, and we interacted with them. We had relationships with all of them before. And so we built partnerships with Oxford, with MIT, with Harvard, with all of these global institutions in the north. Then we went into the south and we built relationships with University of Johannesburg, University of Nigeria, and before you know it, we had a constellation of partners. And guess what? In most instances, they were coming to us because we put a philosophy of higher education and development out there into the conversation. And many of those universities said, you know, we subscribe to the UWI vision. We subscribe to justice and education. We subscribe to social equality. We subscribe to gender equality. We subscribe to all of these philosophies. And they came to us and said, how can we partner with you in building up those networks for joint degrees, for funding solidarity? And this is what we did. And to manage all of that, we now have an Office for Global Affairs, because the dynamism of that process became so substantial, it then had to be institutionalized. PVC Maynard is here, who is leading that global agenda on our behalf. Now, then came COVID. We learned an important lesson. Do you remember seeing all of those body bags in New York? Do you remember seeing on CNN the clock ticking on how many people died today? And do you remember the moment when it hit 1 million have died? And it was marching on, and we were being terrorized. And the same thing was happening in Brazil. The same thing was happening in Mexico. All around the Caribbean, there was chaos and mayhem around the impact of COVID-19, but not in the Caribbean. Because we were able to mobilize all of our public healthcare facilities. We went into an aggressive public education. We met with all the ministers of health in the region, all the policymakers, and we created a Caribbean UWI strategy to control this virus, to explain how it works and get ahead of it. And that's what we did. And that is why we were commended. 2 universities were given top marks for COVID management, Harvard and UWI, because we mobilized the Caribbean against it, and we had the lowest mortality within our space. And that was how we did it, and we did it by using our global networks. So now what do we have? We now have a UWI SUNY. SUNY is a state university of New York. We have a joint UE SUNY Institute for Public Health Management, because they realized what we had was commitment. What they have is money and numbers. And I want you to imagine this. UE has 50,000 students, okay? SUNY has 500,000 students. All right? UE has 5 campuses. SUNY has 55 campuses. SUNY's budget is larger than the budgets of most of our countries combined. Now, but here they are, partnering with the UWI to solve the issues of pandemic management and virology, the spread of diseases. So they came to us, and now we have this joint institute. When I was asked to sign the MOU to put the money together in the budget, I describe it as a dance between an elephant and an ant. And the ant went up to the elephant and says, "Can I have this dance?" And the ant was dancing with her across the floor, throwing her up in the air and catching her and dancing the ant. Yeah? We were the ant. And they were dancing to reggae music. Our music, okay? Our music they were dancing to. So we did that not only in New York, we did it in China. We have a center for software engineering in Suzhou, China. We have West Indian students at our center studying software engineering. Every time I get in my car, which university gave me to drive a BMW thing, I have seen it before, because 3 years ago I was in China visiting our center, meeting our students. And our students in China were working on the BMW software process. They were the ones who were researching it and presenting that to BMW because it was part of their project. The whole thing about biometrics, you know, you get in your car and you put your fingerprint, the car starts, and all kinds of fancy things. Our students were working on that project in China at our center. So our students are out there on the cutting edge of global technology. So we have a center there. It is important for us to recognize this. We have a center in Cuba. If you go today to the University of Havana, which is one of the oldest universities in our region, there's a building that has up there on the sign, University of the West Indies. Because we wanted to work with them on natural products, research on natural products. The Cuban people have been isolated from the pharmaceutical industry for 50 years. They had to go into their environment and find the drugs to create a healthcare system. So we have to smile now. When all of us were growing up and in our backyards, there was turmeric. It was all around us. Our grandparents all cooked with it and give it. But now it's one of the biggest products out there in the world. But we don't control that IP. It's an American company, came to the Caribbean, saw turmeric and said, okay, the old people love cooking with this. It's good for this, it's good for that. High blood pressure and all kinds of things. And they're the ones who commercialize it. The Cubans were doing that all along because they had no choice. So they are one of the most advanced countries in finding pharmaceuticals from natural products. So we went over there to partner with them, because here on this campus, we have the skill sets to work with them. So we have these centers all over the world now. Now, mention was made of the percentage of students we have from around the world, but okay, that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect is not the number of students, it's the number of countries. And in UWI, we have students from 81 countries in the world. So we might have 2 from Argentina, 3 from Turkey, we might have 4 from Iran, we might have 5 from Kuwait, we might have 10 from Nigeria, but we have 81 students, countries represented in our enrollment, right? And they keep coming, and we expect that it will rise to 100 in the next year or so. And this is why, taking advantage of all of this, we've decided to establish a global school built around the Sustainable Development Goals. So now we have an international school for development justice. An international school for development justice. When we roll that out, the magnificence of the response, that we're going to be the only university in the world that has a postgraduate school offering master's degrees on the Sustainable Development Goals. This is a SDG school. We're the only university in the world that has a graduate school dedicated exclusively to teaching and learning on the SDGs, because we have the skills in climate change. Who know more about climate change than we do? Who know more about public health pandemics and poverty than we do? Who know more about the marginalization of the working class and globalization than we do? We have all of that information. And all the SDGs, our countries have signed up to them, so we said, let's build a school to create a learning profile and a research profile on these SDGs. The United Nations came and said, we are fully on board. Went to the United Nations, went to the General Assembly, rolled it out in front of the world. Now that was a remarkable experience, because here was the Vice Chancellor of UWI speaking on the platform of the General Assembly, and in the chair as President of the Assembly was a UWI grad. A UWI grad as President of the United Nations, introducing the Vice Chancellor of his university. And when I went to have lunch with the Secretary General, who is the Secretary General's Chief of Staff? A UWI grad from this campus, from Jamaica. So I was in a total UWI space. While addressing the world, I was surrounded by UWI. And that tells you about our brand and who we are and where we have gone. We have gone global, and our students and our graduates are all over the world doing everything. Now, with over 100 countries represented in our student enrollment in the next couple of years, it's only a matter of time before the president of Russia or the president of the United States or somebody is a UWI grad. It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time. If you have students from Israel and from Palestine and Iran and the United States and Canada, it's only a matter of time before one of the presidents of these countries is a UWI grad. It's only a matter of time. So we are planning for all of these possibilities. All of these possibilities are in front of us. And so the United Nations says, fully endorse. How can we help? Then we had to get the funding. We went to the IDB. The IDB says, we normally lend money to big corporations and governments, but okay, what do you want? We told them what we want. Done. Because we believe in what you're doing. We believe that UWI, by developing this international school, an online school, using the latest technology, using online asynchronous delivery, you have it all. We are fully behind you. Bram, we got the money. Then all the countries came on board. And critically then, we had all of these distinguished professors around the world writing to say, can we be a part of that? Can we be a part of that? So who's the leading globally recognized sustainable development goal expert? I suppose it's Jeffrey Sachs. When you go on your TikTok, Jeffrey Sachs is always there. professor of sustainable development at Columbia University. And he called to say, I have to be in the center of this. So we said, sure, come on in. Went up, met him, and now he is a professor in residence in our Sustainable Development Institute. So, on and on and on. You take your first steps. You take your first steps. Articulate your vision. Set out your philosophy. State what you represent. And you'll be amazed to see the consequences, how people flood to you because they want to be a part of it. So now, yes, so now we are arguably the leading university in the global south. But not only are we the leading, we are also amphibious. We have a foot in the south and we have a foot in the north. Because we know who we are. We have always been a third world, so-called geographically speaking people. We are mostly from Africa and Asia, fine. But look at where Asia has gone. Look at where Asia has gone. Who can tell the West to back off? India and China. Africa is emerging, the fastest growing continent in terms of population, economic structure. I just came back from Addis, Ethiopia 2 weeks ago, where CARICOM and the African Union signed an agreement to create something called Global Africa. So we're no longer speaking about the mother country and diaspora. That's an old paradigm. Mother country? What mother country? We've moved on. Jamaica is an African country as much as Nigeria. It's no longer mother and child. It's no longer center and periphery. It's no longer that, you know, Africa culturally, of course, is the mother, but Africa, no. We are on equal levels. Nigeria, Jamaica, Barbados, Senegal, we are black countries on a level playing field. No longer a hierarchy of structure, level. So that's the new world. And all of them have come to UE to say, how can we be a part of global Africa? You know, I received a letter about 3 months ago, and Sandra is working with this. I don't want to reveal which country it is, but a country said, one of the largest countries in Africa, if not the largest, said, we have 204 universities. And every year, some of them retire, so we have about 30 new vice-chancellors every year. Can we send those 30 new vice-chancellors to UWI? Because we want you to give them a 3-day workshop in the art and the science of university management. Of course, we agreed. So now we're working through all the work permits to bring them here to Jamaica, where they will join us for 3 days, and we will engage them in the discourse about how to run a university in the age of competitive globalization. That speaks to where we are and what we have done. So it would be my honor. And Sandra is working through all the work permits, not work permits, the visas and all of that kind of stuff, because to get to Jamaica, they have to go through England or they have to go through US, they need this and that. So our high commissions in that country are working with them to get it all processed. And that is going to be a phenomenal opportunity, because here we are, providing a seminar on these matters, and we are very much looking forward to that. So my final point is this. UE followed the West Indies Cricket Board and the West Indies cricket team. The cricket is our big brother or big sister. They were established in 1928. We were established in 1948. They reached the global standard, the international standard, before we did. West Indies cricket became the best brand in the world before UE got up there. But we followed them. So they went to the top, and now we are up there. We are now in the top 4% of all the best universities in the world. So we're up there with them. But then came globalization, as I said. And they did not manage it. They did not manage it. When I interviewed all of those young cricketers, and they said, Prof, play for country? What is that? What do you mean play for your country? What is that? Listen, show me my money. Play for country. So, play for country? That's a foreign philosophy. This is the age of franchise cricket, global cricket. It's a product. I'm a professional. I'm selling my skills to the best purchaser, and I have no roots in no country. I'm a global entrepreneur with my skill. Okay, that's where that institution has gone. Is we going to walk that road? No, we're not walking that road. Because we intend to manage this globalization issue better than they did. But fine, we are learning from their mistakes. And they were first out there. And now we are learning how do we take care of our students, our young professors, our young researchers, to keep them committed, dedicated, and keep them as builders. Okay? All of us have to take a pay cut. We all know that. When I go around the world, we have an association of vice chancellors, and I go, and I'm one of the poorest vice chancellors in the room. And all of the vice chancellors of smaller universities, less reputable, little fly-by-night universities are making 10 times my salary. So what? I am not here for that purpose. I am here from the peasantry to make sure that our people have an institution and their children and children that they can be proud of, and they can walk through the door and know they're getting a first-class global international education. That is what this is about. And I hope that we can capture all of these paradigms. All of these paradigms. Sir Lord James once said to me, he says, Hillary, whatever you do, do not die with the paradigm. When the paradigm becomes obsolete, jump off and start a new one. But don't go down with an old paradigm. Look at it, and when that paradigm is dying, you create a new one, jump off, and stay relevant. Stay relevant. Thank you.
We must be committed. We must know our roots. We must build a narrative of partnerships. Thank you once again, Sir Hillary, for that thought-provoking keynote address. I now invite Mr. Seymour Hall to make a presentation to Sir Hillary.
It should be on that side.
On the left.
Okay.
You're on my left.
Okay. Sir Hillary, I am a proud graduate of the University of the West Indies, and it was a pleasure to listen to you today, charting the course of our Caribbean journey, talking about our regional institution and how we remain relevant even amidst all the policy shifts and everything that is happening globally. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For your keynote presentation
Thank
here
you.
today.
Thank you. Is it something I can drink?
Thank you, Mrs. Seymour Hall, and many thanks again, Sir Hillary. We're going to segue to a very short break, and when we return, we're going to transition to panel discussion number 1. Very, very short break. We're going to turn attention to the television. we're going to be looking forward to that. We now transition to panel discussion number 1. It's entitled Assessing and Reimagining Higher Education Internationalization, Exploring Strategic Options in Key Areas amidst Global Policy Shifts. This session invites us to think critically about how institutions across the Caribbean can adapt their internationalization strategies in the face of changing global realities, from funding models and mobility policies to digital transformation and cross-border partnerships. Our moderator is Ms. Sandra Maynard, Co-Vice Chancellor for the Global Affairs at the University of West Indies Regional Headquarters. He will now introduce the distinguished panel and, of course, over to Ms. Maynard. Ms. Maynard, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that introduction. And good morning, everyone, and esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, and partners in higher education. It is a privilege to speak to you today and also to introduce our first panel. That panel is looking at assessing and reimagining higher education internationalization. And here we'll be exploring strategic options in key areas amidst global policy shifts. And we do have an exciting panel joining us today. The first member of that panel is Pro-Vice Chancellor, Professor Emeritus Anthony Clayton, who is a globally recognized authority in futures planning, environmental governance, national security, and sustainable development. With over 40 years of leadership in strategic foresight, public policy innovation, and institutional reform, his work has informed major initiatives funded by multilateral institutions, including UNEP, IDB, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and the World Bank, as well as national governance across Latin America, the Caribbean, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Europe. So Professor Clayton has led or advised on numerous multilateral and government-funded projects with relevance to the blue economy governance, environmental regulations, low-carbon infrastructure, and climate adaptation. He holds a number of senior academic positions, including Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, and he is also a visiting professor at the University of Surrey. He has served on a number of high-level national and regional advisory committees, including Jamaica's Climate Change Advisory Board and Environmental Regulatory Authority Committee, amongst a number of others. So also on our panel, we also have joining us, I think, online, is Dr. Savadia, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, is a globally renowned entrepreneur, distinguished humanitarian, public speaker, and technology disruptor whose work has powered or is powered by a relentless commitment to giving back to society. As founder and CEO, he has transformed the Amber Group into a powerhouse that serves clients in over 100 countries across 5 continents. With 14 diverse business lines spanning mobility, aviation, software development, cybersecurity, media, and EdTech, from smart IoT networks to fintech platforms. An area which is very prominent at the moment, AI, driven education, secure mobility, and next generation media, amongst a number of others. And what sets Mr. Savadia apart is a unique blend of vision and execution. We've heard about the necessity for driving matters forward, and he's certainly the person who is of that ilk. His true success is never measured just in financial terms. His humanitarian work through the Art of Living Foundation and his dedication to charitable causes worldwide reflect a deep purpose to uplift communities and transfer lives far beyond the boardroom. And I'm going to say, finally, not last but not least. Sorry. We have Miss Christina Williams, who is a young lawyer who is joining us here in the room. She has over 15 years of experience as an advocate and policy advisor on quality education. She has been a technical advisor to the landmark higher education and character education policies, which are key efforts at education internationalization through regulation and global citizenship, respectively. As a member of UNESCO's High-Level Financing Committee on Education, Financing and Alignment, and the SDG 4 network, she has championed global cooperation in education, contributing to the Fortaleza, I should pronounce that, Declaration on Education and the United Nations Transforming Education Processes. So thank you very much for joining us, and a warm welcome to you. It seems that I've lost my panel here on my left. So, first of all, before I bring us to our speakers who will be joining us respectively online, I would first like to begin to address you a little bit, just to contextualize the discussion we're going to be having today. And we have heard from our speakers today, and our keynote speaker, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, certainly about the importance of global education. But as we see, the world is evolving. And as it changes and continues to change at a pace that demands not only adaptation, but reimagination. We can't just keep doing the same things we're doing over and over again and expecting the same result. So what do we have to look at? We are witnessing new global policy frameworks, geopolitical realignments taking place, technological acceleration. That is probably one of the hottest topics at this moment in time. Education is struggling to keep up with the pace at which AI is advancing. We also need to look at the fact that there is a heightened consciousness around equity, inclusion, and sustainability. So we have those other areas to also contend with in a tertiary education space. Each of these, singularly and together, are in fact reshaping the way international education landscape in very profound ways. So I ask the question, and I ask those online and those here in the room. The question before us is not simply how we continue internationalizing, but how do we now want to reimagine it in light of these global policy shifts? And I say this because contextually, or historically, many of us here, we've had our own definition of what internationalization is. And how many of us have gone ahead and done like a little sort of travel abroad with our universities? We've done a bit of student exchange, for example. And a lot of the times when we're talking about students crossing across borders and really pushing forward on how we see internationalization, it's often been captured in very limited terms. So, for example, we look at research collaborations. We've heard about the partnerships that we are involved in. Physical mobility is just one singular dimension. What we need to look at is our digital learning and our cross-border credentialing. Looking at our credit recognition, and I know Norda mentioned that earlier today about one area that has been pushed forward significantly, is looking at how qualifications are recognized here in the region and how they're recognized in other countries across the globe. We've also had a rise in micro-credentialing, for example, and looking at our interaction, our cooperation with our partnerships in an international and tertiary education space, we are now redefining what internationalisation means. We also have at the same time these policy shifts we've mentioned. One of the most prominent ones now is immigration. And we've looked at how immigration of a number of countries has significantly shifted in recent times. That is going to impact how we look at internationalisation. Because whilst many persons from those countries will be able to join us here within the region, it will be a significant struggle for students within this region to go to their respective countries. And I shan't mention any names or any particular countries, but to just say that what used to be considered part of our international focus is no longer available to us. We do have the options to meet with, obviously, other countries, but we can see that many countries, from an immigration perspective, are closing down their borders to students travelling. What we also have to consider now is data governance, for example. Looking at ethics around the AI space. Our climate imperatives are having significant impacts. And more importantly, they are creating both constraints and opportunities for higher education institutions. And it's a question of whether we can pivot to be able to take advantage of those opportunities and not feel hindered by the constraints that are facing us here in the region. So, let's look at this, and I'm going to ask a couple of questions that I would love people to think about as we consider our environment. Are our current models still fit for purpose? As I said earlier, are we doing the same thing, expecting the same result? Second question I asked myself when I was looking at, are our partnerships equitable? Are they sustainable? And are they mutually beneficial? We just heard Professor Sir Hilary Beckles talking about the dance between the ant and the elephant, i.e. the UE and SUNY, one of our significant partners that we have an institute with. But we do have to consider these as factors in this particular space. And the third question I asked myself when I was thinking about this was, are we preparing our graduates to thrive in what is a very much interconnected world, but yet fragmented? And these are the kind of questions I would like us to start thinking about when we're considering our strategies around reimagining internationalisation. And I just wanted to look at 4 strategic areas before I move to our panels to address us. And first of all, when we're looking at transformative global engagement, we need to move beyond these transactional arrangements where we sign I always say this, we sign these wonderful MOUs and we say we're doing this because we've got maybe a research project. We do the research project. What happens to that research? How do we now implement that? How does our societies benefit from that? We have these wonderful meetings, we have conferences, our funding is provided for these. What happens when the conferences come to an end? What are we bringing back? How is the partnerships between our organisations mutually beneficial? And I ask these questions because many of us have probably got MOUs in our respective institutions that we can dust we can dust off and say, oh, this looks very interesting. We've had this for a number of years. What have we actually done with it? So I want us to consider 4 strategies and look at those 4 strategic shifts. And I'm sure there'll be many questions asked of me in respect of this, but I'd like us to think firstly, when we're considering mobility, so we need to move from mobility to our global learning ecosystems. take advantage of our AI, take advantage of our digital acceleration that we have here in the world. So rather than just measuring success by how many numbers of students we send out and how many numbers of students we come in, start to invest in our virtual exchanges. Put some value into that. Make it interactive. Look at how we share curricula. Okay? Look at how our global classrooms should really be evolving. And look at how we give access to international learning. That is one of the key areas. Secondly, partnership. How do we move from partnership to co-creation? So many of our partnerships often start very, very well. They move on. But those collaborations between our partners shouldn't be extractive or symbolic. They should be rooted in things such as co-design, co-delivery, and co-benefits where possible. We want knowledge to flow between both of the institutions. And more importantly, we have such a rich cultural element to the diversity within this region is phenomenal. We should be having our interactions, sharing those. It shouldn't just be about, and I'm not reducing this, we have the celebrated music and we have amazing athletes that represent our region. But what we want to do is to share and bring light to our cultural nuances and share that in a global space, in an international global classroom with our partners in the global space. Thirdly, I would like us to just look at how we can have a strategic shift from just international branding across to global responsibility. That's one of the key areas. So higher education institutions really should align its international strategies with global priorities. We've heard, and many of us have experienced here, our climatic changes. Our weather systems are getting worse. We're feeling the impact of climate change even more so. And we're not even the causation of this. These are actions taken by our partners, for example, in the global north, and it is bringing us now into a situation where we have to sit down and talk about how we need to be more climate resilient. We have to look at how we now need to take action around resilience and protecting our particular spaces. So, for example, and the Vice-Chancellor mentioned, we have looked at starting the International School for Development Justice. Why, you may ask? Can't we just adapt to what we've done now and just mention the SDGs? No. What is important here is that people focus on sustainability. If all of us don't focus on that, there will, and I don't mean to be quite dramatic about this, but the world and the situations, our weather conditions and everything else is just going to get increasingly worse over time. So what is the best way to do this? We have to educate people. We have a global responsibility to ensure that where we can educate persons around climate, around social justice, we should take that opportunity to do that. And finally, I say number 4 is to look at from institutional strategy to systemic integration. So, I know I've been introduced as the Pro-Vice-Chancellor of Global Affairs, but what we can't do is, in true internationalisation, cannot sit in an isolated office. Cannot just be a department or an office within an institution. It must be embedded across all of our teaching, our research, our governance and administration. And what we want to see here is more of an ethos rather than just a department. And so, as we listen to our speakers that will be joining us and coming forward, I want us to consider these several strategic options and looking at how we can diversify our partnership models, We may be the ant dancing with the elephant, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be a mutually beneficial partnership. Look at how we work with our national and regional organizations. Look at our civil society organizations and looking at how we can expand our impact beyond academia. That's how we will draw people back in to see the value of higher education. Also, resources may be tight, but we ought to look at how we can put money behind our digital frameworks and digital infrastructures. That is one of the key areas. Further to that, what we cannot ever forget to do is look at how we address our policy alignment within our respective governments and advocacy. We have to engage in policy dialogues across the globe. We must look at how we frame our frameworks around the recognition, looking again at mobility and transnational education. Sustainability is key, and talent and research is also key. So, upon reflection, I'm going to close now because I'm moderator speaker before I invite our next guest to speak, and we will be open for questions after that. It's just, colleagues, I just want us to look at the fact that internationalisation within higher education is not in decline. I'm going to say it's in transition. And it will be more digital, it will be more values driven, and it will be more independent than ever before. And with that transition lies a significant opportunity for us to craft new pathways that are inclusive, resilient, and globally relevant. So I charge us all here, both in the room and online, to consider that. So on that note, I hope a jovial note, everybody seems a little bit sad in the room. I didn't mean to bring that down, but let's move forward, not with nostalgia, I'm going to say, but with a purpose of what can be. And I'm going to indicate over here, so our first speaker that I'm going to invite to discuss is Christina Williams. May I invite you up to the podium to have a discussion on what you're going to speak to us about. We're going to open with some questions afterwards. So any burning questions that we have, those of us who are online, please put it into the Q&A section. And any of those in the room, please raise your hand if there are any questions that you have to ask. Oh, I've been informed you can sit where you are. May I come and join you there?
Yes, please.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, so I think this is an opportunity for me to showcase my global competencies because I didn't know I had to do opening remarks. I thought I just was going to respond to questions. Nonetheless, in terms of internationalization and globalization, speaking from the context of a young professional and someone who represents students, one of our concerns is how do we democratize and decolonize education when we think about globalization, internationalization. Because there's a lot of concern, or rather a lot of focus on having students move between campuses, global mobility, being involved in distance learning programs, visiting different universities, etc. But then we think about our own scholarship within our universities, within our region, within our countries, and we're like, why isn't there more focus on that? Why isn't there, and I know this may sound simple, even silly, but we're thinking about UE students, because I'm a former UE student, I'm a former guild president. We're thinking about sending UE students to other universities abroad. Why aren't we having cross-partnerships, cross-cultural partnerships with J-TEC, with NCU, with Michael, with other teachers' colleges? Why is it that when we think about having this framework of partnership, it's always beyond our own borders? And if we're trying to, and as you mentioned, PVC Maynard, we're trying to have a value-centered approach to globalization, internationalization. And if we're looking at values and local concerns, local priorities, or regional concerns and priorities, then having these kind of partnerships are even more important, because the young people within Jamaica, the students within Jamaica, we want to solve Jamaican issues, Caribbean issues. And if we have these partnerships happening between the students and within the faculties in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, we may see more region-specific outcomes. I think one of my concerns as well, and being a COVID president, I was a guild president during the pandemic, and everyone was on board to have virtual learning, online learning. And now it seems as if that topic has become taboo again. No one wants to discuss having programs fully online, aside from our open campus or our global campus. But within the other campuses, the Kville, the UA, St. Augustine, why aren't online programs still considered a norm? Why is it the exception of the rule? And that is important, because we don't have to travel to access global ideas, and to develop global competencies. It should be integrated into all of our programs, but not just the curricula or the pedagogy, but also how we deliver. And more students want to earn, want to learn. More students want to be able to access the micro-credentialing across different campuses globally, or through other programs. And if we're saying to students that you can only learn if you come into the classroom Mondays to Friday or on the weekend, whenever, then you're already limiting a wide cohort of our students from being able to access these global and international opportunities. There's also the concern of not exacerbating inequalities through these programs. So I remember when I did, I've done a number of degrees, and one of the degrees I did was international relations, and they had this thing where here at UA, you could get an internship if you're part of the top 1%. And only the top 1% could get an internship through the university. And then you also had other programs where you could go away on like the French-speaking or Spanish-speaking program, once again, top 1%, really high GPA or very involved, or you had to be able to supplement funding, which meant that if you didn't have a particular grade, you couldn't access this program, or particular funding, you couldn't access this program. And yes, we do want to incentivize our high-performing students, or students who have a particular GPA. I mean, I am all for that as someone who graduated with high honors from the university. But at the same time, we do not want to exclude our students. We keep talking about leaving students behind, not leaving students behind. But when we have these kind of programs that already set up a type of student to be able to access global mobility programs, then we're actually creating further inequalities, because you're saying to the student who can't afford it, or for whatever reason wasn't able to access the space prior to, that you will not get this additional opportunity. And so you continue to have your top 1% graduate and become the top 1% in the world, and other students can't be pulled up and get at that level as well. I think the other thing I want to add is, how is it that we ensure that our students are being more employable, as well as entrepreneurship, for those that are involved in these global programs or approach to globalization, internationalization? I don't know how many of you here may be aware, and those of you listening online, but the World Bank knows that in 2030, 1.2 billion young people will be in the workforce in the global south, an additional 1.2 billion. And when they look at the number of jobs, or what they estimate will be the number of jobs available in 2030, it will actually only be 800 million. So 1.2 billion young people in the workforce, only 800 million jobs will be, forgive me, 420 million. Let me rephrase that. 1.2 billion in the workforce, 420 million jobs will be available, which means that a large portion of our young people in the workforce, those who have gone to university and otherwise, will not be able to get a job based on this estimation. And so when we think about globalization, internationalization of our programs, the question should be, how can we get more of our young people in the global south, in Jamaica, in the Caribbean, across our different island nations, to be employable in a global market? And for those who don't want to be employed, and I'm considering that myself as I speak, moving beyond traditional employment. To those who want to start their own businesses and want to become entrepreneurs, how do we prepare them for that world as well, to create jobs for others and opportunities for others? So as we consider this value-based approach, one of the value that we should be focused on is having young people who can create industries of the future for themselves and for others. And I think that's my opening remarks until we have further questions.
Thank you so much. I don't know if I turn this on. Yes, thank you so much for that. And I'm going to, before we move to questions, which I'm going to invite them to, I know that Mr. Savadia is joining us online. So I'm wondering if we could ask him to come in and give us a few remarks in respect of how he sees the reimagination of higher education in a global space. Have you not got him online? The challenges of working within a global space. I think it's probably going to be you and I, Christina, going ahead with any questions. As we're trying to get Mr. Savadia, could I ask, are there any questions that have come up in the room thus far from anything that Christina or myself have opened with? Oh, please. I think there's a mic just behind there, if you'd like to ask your question. Oh, there's a gentleman coming over with the mic for you. Oh, there we go. Could I ask you your name, please, if you don't mind sharing that before you do your question?
Donna Powell Wilson from the Council of Community Colleges of Jamaica.
Excellent.
Hi, Christina. Is this Christina?
Yes, yes. From board.
Right. While I ponder your comments, I am compelled to reference something that I am not only curious but passionate about. And Mrs. Seymour Hall spoke to it in her presentation, the National Qualification Framework. You ask a very pertinent question. We're talking about internationalization, yes, but what about the local scenario? Why aren't we looking more at interactions between local universities? And the National Qualification Framework, I think, is the best place to start. We have something on paper. I think Mrs. Seymour Hall indicated that it will be reviewed. Mrs. Seymour Hall, it will be reviewed. I am eagerly awaiting that, because what we have now is on paper, and our students who, some will not get the opportunity to do the internationalization, but I think they can benefit more from local interactions with universities. Let us dance at home first.
Indeed, dance yard before we dance abroad, as my grandmother would say. What I will add to that is we don't have to choose either or. It's not a local over international or global, because as I mentioned in my presentation, it's a case where we are integrating these values, ideologies, these competencies into the curriculum. So even if it is that you're having local partnerships, regional partnerships, it's still possible to learn these international, learn about these international aspects as well. I'm sure Professor Maynard will be sure next. So I think it's more a case of how are we building our local competencies within a global framework, a global marketplace, to create context to this. I have never, to date, fingers crossed, because I would love the opportunity eventually. But to date, I've never studied at an international university. But I have gone on to work with UNESCO, sit on international boards for them, and work on international education policy, because I sat on the CCJ board with you, right, and was the chair of the governance committee as a young person while as a student. So imagine the government of Jamaica thinking that a young person, young professional student was had an equal voice as an equal partner to be on a government board to help with education policy. Then UNESCO was able to say, then I think that you're also deserving this opportunity. So you see how when we build local competencies, then you can able to flourish in international context as well, speaking from my own personal story.
And just to add to that, thank you so much, Christine. Just to add to that as well, look, I agree with Christine. It's not a matter of it's either or. Yes, there is clearly an argument to reinforce and to expand the framework and the interactions between the universities within the region. For example, I have one example of that. There's an institute, we have the Canadian Caribbean Institute, in which we work. There are 6 regional institutions, universities both here in Jamaica as well as within the Caribbean region, that works with 6 of our Canadian partners. And what we do is we really look at matters, issues in the world, policies, digitalization, sustainability, things that matter across both of our societies. We try to look at how we can influence governance. We look at how we can best exchange ideas, looking at our cultural appreciations from the indigenous persons within Canada to our indigenous persons here in Jamaica, for example. I don't feel that there needs to be a choice between we have to get it right here first, because education and the space within education is advancing so quickly. Right. We need to be in contact with our global partners, because then we will not be able to prepare our students for a global marketplace. Okay. And whether they're studying, whether they want to begin their own businesses, whether they choose to go and work for some of that time in another country, it would be remiss of us to say, let's get it right here first before we go out globally. It has to be done simultaneously. Right. We cannot, if we shut our borders down to internationalisation and global activity, we are disadvantaging our members of our countries within this region even more so. Because as we look at the AI race, for example, and I'm going to give this as an example. The AI race on the hardware front has been won by the USA, for example, China, and areas and countries such as that. We may not have a chance in the hardware race, but we have a lot of talent in this region. We have a lot of competencies, we have a lot of capacity to be able to create areas such as software engineers, coders, so we could actually move into winning the software global race.
And the content.
If we just, and if we kept ourselves just focused here, we won't have anything to be able to help develop our societies in. I agree with you that some focus needs to come from within, but also we cannot ignore the global space.
Thanks, Madam Moderator. Good day, everybody. I'm Halden Morris. I'm a member of the J-TEC community. I'm also the chairman for the vocational VTDI, which is probably a marginalized part of education. So my question is, how do we level this global space without addressing the areas that are, well, I would say marginalized in education, and perhaps some of the most important areas in our education system to provide technical persons to carry out all the tasks that we need to do, for the country, put up the buildings, the roads, whatever we need to do technically. We have a challenge with those. Madam, you mentioned the challenge we have with respect to the hardware space. And I think probably we need to get grips with that. And I think we have a lot of opportunities here to make our space relevant in terms of hardware and how we can interact with it to make it globalize. I'm speaking to some of the things that we do, and we try to bring this to the Caribbean. I'm a member of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. And one of our mission is to get the universities together to talk about the hardware, the education, the space going forward, the AIs, and so on and so forth. And as such, we try to fix that space. And luckily, I'm a member of the J-TEC community. I spent 20 years there, 19 years really, 19 years and 8 months. And I'm a member of the UWI community. And I crossed the board, well, I was at UWI for more than 20 years, so without my time there. But the point is, there has been always this kind of collaboration between J-TEC and UWI with respect to technical education. But it's not driven from the top. It's usually from the bottom, the lecturers trying to do things and so on. Yeah. But there should be some policy as it relates to how the government interact with this part of education to ensure that there is some kind of value-added discussion going on to make it relevant to the Caribbean and to Jamaica in particular. We have an elephant in the room in Jamaica, not this room, Jamaica. Okay. And that is a space called our National Training Agency, which is a very well-funded agency to deliver technical vocational education and training. If we are to internationalize this part of education in Jamaica, we need to get more active as it relates to our national funding agency to drive that part of the mechanism. And I think probably part of the discussion could be speaking to how do we get our national agency to look at higher education as a very important part of the space going forward in order to meet all the matrices for delivering the hardware space you're talking about, and of course the software space. Just some comments here and probably that question.
I wanted to add something really quickly because I feel like we have someone on the call that will be very good at answering this question. But I wanted to add something. I think that before we even get to thinking from the context of prioritizing in higher education, I think it has to be a priority across the board as equal education, as an equal education route. Because we always think about it as an alternate option. You know, if you haven't been able to become lawyer, doctor, engineer, then you go do that. So from the very basic level, from early childhood, a child needs to be taught that this is an equal opportunity route. And using Jamaica as a context, if we as a people prioritize it equally, then I think it will filter down into everything in terms of how we invest, the investment priorities. As you say that the leaders in HI, in the higher education institutions will prioritize in terms of the partnerships. But I think that we can't just solve it from that level. I think from the level of how do we prioritize it as an equal route of education.
Absolutely.
Right. I'm going to say this, that often, I always say this, when we talk about integration from a executive level, that often doesn't happen in most spaces. We know that. It is when I was in faculty in my previous role that I know that we really had that kind of interaction with our local or our closest partnerships. And as far as it looks, my understanding is we work with each other very well in that sense. We're all working towards the same goal. But when it comes to looking at our technical education, for example, there are a lot of agencies doing a similar thing. That's, I think, looking at it, that's your first issue that we have. And maybe there needs to be a evaluation taking place to look at how, for example, universities can help move into that space. And I know everyone sits here and we've heard about the colonizers and the English accent. I'm actually from the region, born in the region, but grew up in the UK, so hence the English accent. But I will say this much here. When I've worked across spaces, for example, where you've got technical colleges saying, Why are higher education institutes not working with that? We did do something like that. So we created a framework, for example, in the UK, where there was that integration. And that acknowledgement of if I call it the vocational and technical skills, coupled with achieving the academic skills needed. We come from a culture where, let's be fair, our parents like us to go to university. That indicates to our parents how well we have done, how well we are achieving our standards in life. It's a very difficult point to make, is that it's not as though our value is any different between the technical jobs and what the jobs of the lawyers, doctors, engineers do, but the value placed on it, particularly within our family space, and the way we are brought up is often very different. You know, I come from that background. I'm a barrister at law, or what you would call an attorney at law here, but I'm a barrister at law in the UK, and I have been for 27 years. I moved across into education for one reason, because I noticed in the UK a lot of black and minority ethnic persons could not get access into my profession. So I thought, well, I'm going to make it my business to go in and help them get access into there. So I started going back to look at the learning spaces that we were working within. And of course, you know, there were so many options and so many access routes to get there. People were often confused. There were varying standards attributed to those. So what we may need to do is to look at how we harmonise a framework in which they can move into a higher education space. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing a vocational-based course, but then come to the university and say, okay, how are you going to recognise that for the first couple of years, and then maybe those students can join online to convert that into a degree. I'm just doing it as an example. Maybe we want to look at things around degree apprenticeships. So those persons that have to commit to their household income and support families can still work and still study at the same time. But all I'm saying is we do need to go back and look at and evaluate that, because there's so many of them. What's the straightforward pathway that we should be creating?
Well, actually, we have done some things about that. We have tried to fix some of those challenges. And as such, the UWI now offer a Masters of Arts in Leadership in Technical Vocational Education and Training, as well as an MPhil PhD in that area. And also J-TEC offer similar degrees in those areas. So we have really done some movement in relation to solving some of those problems. But the challenge still remains that TVET, for example, is a national, well, it's a good, it's a national good. Without this, our nation just won't develop. But this, from my experience at UWI, there's not one student that ever got a scholarship from government or any kind of funding as it relates to getting their higher degrees. And they're going back into this space to perform. So probably if we are to fix this, we need to fix some of these challenges as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I don't want to ignore, we do have, we managed to technically bring our other panelist online. And I would love him to just join the conversation to say a few words. Sorry? Oh, sorry, I didn't hit him. No, we don't have that person online. My apologies. Apparently he is unwell and unable to join us. I've been told now we have our timing issues, so thank you very much for your questions. Thank you to our panelists who were able to join us today. And I'm going to hand over to our moderator, who should be joining us online for our next section. So thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you. A round of applause for moderator panelists. Thank you. We'll now take a very brief interlude to enjoy the performance by RSI Steel, whose artistry adds to vibrant culture, and that will be done so in today's proceedings. Handing over to RSI Steel. discussion number 2, which focuses on the topic institutional pivoting and strategic partnerships to promote internationalization amidst global policy shifts. This is a conversation, ladies and gentlemen, I'm particularly excited about because it gets to the heart of what institutions must do to stay relevant, to stay resilient, and to be globally connected in a time of rapid change. The reality is partnerships are no longer optional. They are the foundation for growth, innovation, and sustainability in higher education. I'll be moderating this discussion, and I'm joined by an august panel of colleagues who each bring unique insights and experiences. At the table and also online are Ms. Leo Boson, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She's head of partnership at UNESCO. Please put your hands together. We also have Dr. Sharika Akers. She's representing J-TEC. At the head table, we have Dr. Donald Powell Wilson, the Executive Director of the Council of Community Colleges of Jamaica. We also have Dr. Kevin Brown, the President of the University of Technology, Jamaica. And we also have Mr. Steve Davis, Head of Sports at GC Foster College. And to round out our panel is Professor Roger Hewitt. He's President of the International University of the Caribbean. Ladies and gentlemen, today we will explore how regional and international collaborations can shape a stronger and a more agile Caribbean higher education system. To get us started, I'm going to invite each of the panelists to share a very brief opening statement, just about 2 or so minutes, offering their perspective on today's theme, institutional pivoting and strategic partnerships. I'm going to begin with Ms. Boson. She's online and she represents UNESCO. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Doreen, and thank you so much to the organizer of this conference. I've been following the very first panel, very enlightening in a way that people care about internationalization, but at the same time, people care about localization. And thank you, Doreen, for laying this great foundation by saying that partnership is no longer an option, but rather something that we must push forward together. So with that said, I want to start with indicating that the United Nations have launched the United Nations South-South University Cooperation Network in December 2023, and it's co-launched by UNESCO International Institute for Higher Education, UNESCO ESL Command representing, as well as the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation. This very monumental South-South University Cooperation Network, in a way, is an immediate and a very timely response to the Third World Higher Education Conference that was hosted in Barcelona back in 2022 to highlight the importance to expand and diversify the partnership models in order for us to move together with a specific focus on South-South and triangular cooperation. Since the launch of the network, we have had the great honor to work with Jamaica for both of the pilot projects that have been launched under this network. One is on greening higher education, which focuses on science, technology, and innovation at institutional level. So University of West Indies, as one of the 10 leader universities carefully selected across 4 Global South regions, have joined not only the Greening with Science, Technology, and Innovation Bootcamp that have resulted in 22 viable greening solutions, but also joined the working group to actually define the directions and the strategies for the South-South University Cooperation Network for 2026 to 2030, leading to the realization of the United Nations 2030 Agenda. And in the Blue Economy Projects, which is the first pilot project under this network that focuses on triangular cooperation involving 4 countries, including Jamaica, Chile, Angola, and Portugal, we have been seeing very wonderful results on Global South truly taking the leadership and making critical decisions on how we can preserve, protect, and develop coastal areas all together, with higher education being the core of technical support, and the other stakeholders really providing support to the materialization of any of the actions and solution. So with that said, we're very grateful for the wonderful leadership work that J-TEC has been coordinating within Jamaica, bringing on board different higher education institutions and really bringing in the policy perspective into the concrete actions that we want to carry out through research, through stakeholder mapping and engagement, and through community engagement to ensure that real South-South exchanges and triangular cooperation can not just take place at policy level, but concretely touching the lives of individuals. So I'll stop here. Thank you so much. A lot more to say later.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We go over now to Dr. Dakers. Your 2 minutes. Is Dr. Dakers with us? All right, seems that we're not having Dr. Dakers online. Dr. Paul Wilson, I'm going to go over to you with a microphone. Oh, we now have Dr. Dakers. I think she's online. Great. Dr. Paul Wilson, hold your horses just 1 second. Dr. Dakers, go right ahead.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We're hearing you fine.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me this evening. It's an honor to be a part of this conversation and this conference this year. As you shared earlier on, I am a member of the Jamaica Diaspora Task Force Action Network, and it's been a pleasure. This is not my first go around with collaborating with J-TEC in regards to the work that can be done as we talk about how we're able to build capacity in regards to our tertiary institution. Now, the focus of JD10 is to develop and maintain what we consider to be a global task force with a movement that is guided by individuals who are passionate about giving back to Jamaica and building that capacity in order to empower the work that can be done. Now, one of the 4 pillars of JD10, which I'll talk a lot more about later on, talks about partnership and collaboration. And over the years since JD10 has been around 10 years this year, we celebrate that, we have put ourselves into places and spaces where we're able to build those integral and essential partnership to keep the work moving forward. Partnerships that I'll talk about later on with, for example, the Jamaica Teachers Association, in making sure we're bringing to the forefront those needs, those high needs that are identified, and how we're able to step in with collaboration and support in those areas. I'll definitely talk more about that in our conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dakers. Over to Dr. Paul Wilson, head of the CCCJ Jamaica.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henry. Good morning again, everyone. The Council of Community Colleges of Jamaica has supervisory responsibility for 10 institutions locally. That's 5 with the words community college in their name, and 3 multidisciplinary and 2 polytechnic institutions. We value partnerships, so we always look for opportunities for faculty and students to experience another culture, to be globally competitive. When we talk about internationalization at the CCCJ, we look at 4 things: student and faculty mobility, academic partnership and program development, virtual and online internationalization, and research and development collaboration. At present, we have 11 active partnerships with institutions and organizations worldwide. And I will leave it there for now.
All right, thank you, Dr. Paul Wilson. Over to Holyoke Road, Dr. Kevin Brown. You may go right ahead for your 2 minutes.
Good morning, Dr. Henry. Thank you so much. Let me just start by thanking the J-TEC team for the invitation and for this conference on a very important topic. Let me also acknowledge my Deputy President and Provost, Professor Shermaine Barrett, and we also heard from Professor Morris earlier. Internationalization has always been a part of the UTEC Jamaica framework insofar as working with institutions outside of Jamaica to achieve several goals. But I would say that the outcomes have been mixed. We have several MOUs with international partners on topics such as student exchange programs, staff exchange, capacity building, research, and other areas. But I think perhaps it's now time for us to see how we could improve the outcomes in a more sustainable way. What I've observed is that we will have partnerships, and at the very beginning there is great energy and momentum, but the sustainability is the problem, right? So so you find that over time these partnerships, the impact diminishes. So it's something that we're going to be looking at as an institution going forward, and I think it's a challenge for all universities. I listened to Sir Hilary Beckles' keynote and the accomplishments of the UII, and they are pretty inspiring and pretty tremendous. I think for us at UTEC, internationalization for us starts at home, and I think the focus now is how can we grow the number of students that we attract from the Caribbean. We've always had Caribbean students on campus, but the numbers, I think, need to grow insofar as the opportunity there to work closely with other Caribbean islands on ensuring that they have the STEM workforce that they need. And so there's an opportunity for us to do more to attract these students to our campus. We are unique insofar as an institution in Jamaica that offers certain disciplines that are only available in the English-speaking Caribbean, such as architecture and public health. So I think there is a tremendous opportunity for UTEC and Jamaican universities and higher education institutions to reach out to the Eastern Caribbean. They're in the backyard and do more with those countries. But then there's the wider world. Now, geopolitics has created a very interesting phenomenon whereby it would seem to some of us that the developed nations are retreating from international students insofar as their immigration policies. I was in the UK for 23 years. The universities there, their business model was built around international students. It generated significant revenue, and now they're having several challenges because the immigration policies are changing. We see the same happening in America, Canada, Australia. Is it an opportunity for us in Jamaica? Maybe, maybe not, because why would an international student come here? And when you look at the market, international students are mainly from India, China, and so we need to do more to create a stronger case as to why our institutions are as good as any for them to pursue their studies here. There's also more to be done around research, and I think perhaps therein lies the real opportunity, I believe, in working with international institutions and governments perhaps to build out our research capacity at UTEC, at UWI, to expose our staff to the state of the art, and I hope that we can see more of that emerging. That's certainly an ambition we have at UTEC. But another interesting thing that hasn't come up in the conversation yet is also being able to attract international staff. There are subjects at UTEC in areas like in dentistry and other disciplines where we cannot find local staff to teach. Right, and so there is a need to attract international experts in these areas to come and teach. And I can tell you, it is difficult, it is challenging, and perhaps stronger partnerships are needed there. Right now, we're in conversations with a whole range of countries, including Nigeria, Cuba, and so on, to get staff in. So internationalization is very important. I look forward to the conversation that we're about to have.
All right, thank you, Dr. Brown. Over to Mr. Davis, Head of Sports at GC Foster.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. Am I heard? Thank you, Dr. Henry. At GC Foster, we are, should I say, fully international. Because every time that we have an Olympics, a World Championship, or we have champs being manifested and the character games, many of the countries within the region, and from as far as the Maldives, China, Australia, Canada, they come to us because they want to know what is it that is being done in Jamaica to have this kind of continued success in track and field especially. So we are in talks with Guyana now. We have students from St. Vincent, we have students from Guyana, Trinidad, the Maldives. We have had students from China who came to do the coaching program. We have collaborations with J-TEC, offering the master's degree in physical education. And we have a number of collaborations with local organizations. For instance, J-TEC, who certifies us, thanks for that wonderful review that we got just now. We are part of the Teaching Council of Jamaica, TCJ. It means that we're in collaboration with UE under the Joint Board of Teacher Education because they are the accrediting body for, not the accrediting, but the awarding body for our degree. But earlier, a presenter mentioned that or a member of the audience mentioned that some programs are marginalized and looked down upon. Physical education is one such program because apart from the traditional part of teaching PE in the classroom, the other aspects are looked at in a negative light. And it is strange to me because in terms of salaries, the people out of physical education are paid more than anybody else in this world. Cristiano Ronaldo, to spend a night in his hotel is over $1 million. And they are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars per week. What we do not do well, and Dr. Hillary Beckles mentioned cricket, when with West Indian cricket is going back, because we do not take care of our athletes very well. So they move on. The Australians don't need to do that because their countries, their organizations take care of them very well. So we need to take care of our athletes. So at GC Foster, we have implemented programs. The physical preparation of the athletes, we have the massage therapy department that deals with the care. And out of this massage therapy department, we have supplied all the major clubs in Jamaica with massage therapists. We have worked for other countries where sports massage is concerned. So we have athletes from Canada that trained at GC Foster. And when they are going away, our coaches go with them, our massage therapists go with them. So we work for other countries. But generally speaking, as a nation, we do not see these aspects of sport as lucrative or, what should we say, prestigious. And as a result, we are losing our athletes, we are losing our professionals. Now our lives is massaged by one of our graduates. They go away because financially it is more rewarding. So as a nation, we need to find a way of ensuring that our workers, our students are cared for and treated in the best possible ways. I don't know if you have ever had the experience where people come for collaboration, say from South Africa, India, and they came and they sat. But after you have done a tour of the facility, you can look at your faces and see that. So they are wondering, what with that gym you produce these kinds of athletes? How is it that this is done? You know, so I don't want to overemphasize the point, but we need to fix our local setting first in order to ensure effective and profitable collaborations internationally. Thanks.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. Professor Hewitt, you have the final 2 minutes before we go into the meat of the matter. You need to unmute Professor Hewitt. Professor, you need to
Thank you very much.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henry. I want to use my 2 minutes by just focusing on a niche area. I want to speak from the perspective of those institutions founded by the church and where higher education is being more or less being pushed through that type of commitment. The university that I'm a part of, the International University of the Caribbean, comes from that kind of faith tradition. And so, in fact, the very theme for this conference fits in quite well with a recent conference that I attended in Korea, looking at the very future of faith-based universities and how they can pivot themselves into this AI-driven era. For us, partnership is at the very root of our existence. I would dare say without that, we would not exist, because being a private university with minimal resources coming from the wider faith community, we have to engage with partnership, not just locally, but internationally, and even much more so. The key, I want to lift up two key terms: adaptability and resiliency. We are constantly faced with the need to rethink and to revitalize higher education to be much more responsive and to be relevant to the evolving challenges that are around us. The whole idea of the context in which we live, economic transactional forces in which education is being commodified, the fact of the matter that education that has been bequeathed to us is very much rooted in a European cultural bias, and we have to rethink all of this in terms of the urgency to equip our students to move beyond competence to formation for a sound moral and ethical compass to navigate the world, to respond to the needs of the marketplace with a kind of unflinching commitment to do justice that can neutralize corruption. And thirdly, the passion for service and not just for personal gain. I want to lift those points out because that's how we in our community would like to look at our partnership. Let me use some key examples and then I keep quiet because we can talk a bit more later. Tomorrow, we have a team of young people from across the world coming to us. We'll spend about two months with us from just about a lot of the countries rather from the global south. I want to underline global south because we see the need for our growth pushing us for partnership with the global south. We do not see the need that the development of an institution necessitates us to just do it alone. We have gone into partnerships with University of KwaZulu-Natal in doctoral related programs. And notice the bias there because I've spent a decade working in the global south and especially at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. And I think a lot of our students in Jamaica, we have been so rooted towards looking to the north, to the United States and to Europe, but there's a wider resource available. Sure enough, our students are heading to the east, but my niche, my bias is for us to also go south. And I think South Africa and Kenya and a number of countries on the African continent, they offer excellent resources for us to link up with. As I said, I speak from the background of church and education. In my tradition of the United Church, we say evangelization through education. We're a part of a network of 36 churches around the world. So some of our financial resources which cannot come from government. It is how we engage with our partners around the world. And just one final comment here, with my colleague from J-TEC who mentioned about recruiting teachers. That's how we too see the need for recruiting teachers, not just in having them, but getting them to be properly funded to come to us. It is through partnership. So I'll say much more about how strategic, the strategic role that partnership can play in the resiliency of any higher education institution.
All right. Thank you, Professor Hewitt. You seem to be enjoying that vacation that you seem to be at right now. That background that you have there is so tempting. Let me bowl off with the first.
Jamaica.
Certainly. Let me bowl off with the first question, and I'm going to invite persons to post questions in the chat. I want to articulate as many questions as possible with our August panel. My first question, I'm going to bowl this to Dr. Brown. Many institutions are being forced to rethink their operating models, including yours, Dr. Brown, due to shifting priorities, shifting global priorities, and funding constraints. How can Caribbean institutions become more agile and resilient in this kind of climate?
Thank you. I think every institution is certainly trying to adapt to the external environment. There's a lot going on in terms of technological change, geopolitics. For us at J-TEC, we are resetting our entire agenda as it relates to the university, its purpose, its focus. We're a STEM-focused institution, and I think that presents an advantage based on the technological age that we are in. However, we have identified 5 key areas that we want to address, and I believe in all these areas, internationalization will play a role. The first thing is that for the last 6+ decades, J-TEC has been an amazing teaching intensive university. We have produced quality graduates. I heard Sir Hilary talk about UA graduates. Well, J-TEC also has a strong pedigree of alumni who are leaders in industry. But we want to become more research intensive, and so it is through internationalization, working with partners in the north who have very strong research landscapes, that we think we can make some inroads in that area. So research is going to be important for us. And bear in mind, and I want to say this to everyone, that universities must do research, because it's only through research that universities will help to solve societal problems. Hilary Beckles spoke about climate change. We must be doing research in our universities around climate change resilience. But Darren, we want to expand access. Only 27% of young Jamaicans enter tertiary institutions, and we want to expand. Sir Hilary spoke to that drive. J-TEC shares the same vision. We want more Jamaicans to experience tertiary education. We believe that there are opportunities through the use of technology going online that we can achieve this as well. And finally, the idea of joint degrees with international partners. And I know some universities in Jamaica are already doing that, but I think that if we can have more partnerships around joint degrees, especially at the graduate level, then that would be advantageous. But I want to say finally, Darren, I think someone in the previous panel, they asked, why don't we see more partnerships with UE and J-TEC and other institutions? And I want to say this because we have to be honest in our discourse. We've had partnerships in the past, right? Some may recall that the tourism degree at J-TEC was a joint degree between UE and J-TEC, right? What we must achieve, though, in Jamaica is a level of equity. I think if you go into a partnership where one entity believes that they are tier 1 and you're tier 2, it won't work. We have to go in there as acknowledging each other's strengths. And it must be a level playing field. That my friends, you know, and I say this to all my colleagues in the tertiary space who I want to work with, is how we're going to move forward. I believe, for example, that J-TEC and Heart NSTA have a good partnership because we believe that we're equal partners. We see the strengths of Heart NSTA and they see the strengths of J-TEC, and our partnership continues to flourish. I think if we see more of that across the tertiary space, we will have these partnerships and we will sustain them.
Thank you very much. Dr. Dakers, let me bowl this one at you. What does institutional pivoting look like in very practical terms? Is it about leadership? Is it about policy? Is it about cultural change? Or is it a mix of all? Let me allow you to share your perspectives.
That is a very great question. I wouldn't say it's either or. It's definitely a mixture of all. When we think about pivoting, right, and being that institutional space, a tertiary institutional space, we're thinking about all the factors you just mentioned. When we talk about the cultural aspect, right, how is it that education in the tertiary level is seen initially? How has it been seen over the years? But with keeping that in perspective, being very intentional about what is to come, and being able to step in the space, create the opportunities and the platform to pivot to meet the needs and the demands of learners who are coming to tertiary institution and looking to leave a tertiary institution and be able to be employed, right? And to be employed in high needs area, in spaces where they're able to utilize their skills that they have been got.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dr. Paul Wilson, let me bowl this ball at you. Partnerships have long been central to this notion of internationalization. But in this global reality, what makes a partnership truly strategic? And you have been at the front seat where collaborating and establishing partnerships are concerned. But what makes it truly strategic?
Dr. Henry, and I'll borrow a few words from Dr. Brown. There has to be equity, so it should not be seen as one institution having more authority over the other. So partnership requires honesty and being deliberate from the beginning. The partnerships that the CCCJ has would point to specific deliverables from the CCCJ and also from the partnering institution. There are times when what we set out to do, it's not achieved. And honesty again at the table. I do recall in the development of a program for internationalization, we look at program development with our partners. And we had this particular arrangement with an institution where we developed the associate degree with the institution to enhance globalization. So having completed this program, the students are now ready for the global space. And also the students would feed into the institution's bachelor program. What we found was that having completed the program locally, the students were not able to afford the tuition cost to go to the partnering institution, not only tuition costs, but relocation and all of that. So we had to, we had a discussion with the partner, and recognizing the challenges, the partner assisted us in developing the bachelor program so the students could remain. So even though they did not get to go to the physical location, they still experienced some internationalization in the curriculum, and there were provisions within the program for the students locally to do a study tour, a site visit as part of their program. Also, they had what is a session in what is known as COIL, Collaborative Online International Learning, where for particular courses, lecturers from the partnering institution would share with lecturers locally. At some point, they may meet asynchronous or synchronous, and there will be an interaction with the students. So partnerships requires honesty. Look at the resources that we have available. What is it we want to achieve from the partnership? And when there are challenges, we work to see how we can resolve those challenges in the interest of both institutions.
Thank you, Dr. Paul Wilson. I want to challenge Professor Hewitt on the notion of equity. We had a challenge a couple of years ago when we established a partnership with Red River College in Winnipeg, but cost was a serious factor. The students were from very humble beginnings, from very humble backgrounds, and they were having serious challenges overcoming that hurdle. How do we ensure that these collaborations are reachable and that they are equitable and that we're not just participants in the process?
Indeed, there will always be those challenges, especially with what you'd say unequal resource-based institution. But I think it is actually, one can overcome that link with the leadership just being honest with each other and putting all of those factors on the table and to say, for example, this is the reality that one faces. Now, Jamaica, let me use an example. These students that we're training coming from a number of countries in the global south. Jamaica, I must say, although I don't think we celebrate the kind of social resource that we have. My colleague from GC Foster spoke about sports, but it's much wider than that. Jamaica has awesome resources that the rest of the world need to learn about. And these students who are coming, we are taking them into a program that we call Peace Building, Resiliency, and Wellness. And that involves not just the theoretical framework of things, but participating in community engagement in Mountain View areas, in Boys Town, etc. Now, the resources to facilitate that to happen, it doesn't necessarily mean that money is the only resource and that is what equity is being measured by. I say no to that. We must use other additional resources, such as what we have, that the rest of the world needs. So this is what I would like to suggest, that we must not underestimate what we have and to treat them as exceptional value that the world also needs. So we don't belittle what we have in comparison to what others claim they have in terms of financial resources.
Okay, head of sports at GC Foster, Mr. Davis, do you share those views and just provide? GC Foster is an important institution in national life. How has partnership really advanced your institutional goals? Looking at some very practical examples.
A few summers ago, prior to that, would have gone to Tobago. And we did a training program with coaches that they have in the primary schools. And because of the success of that program, with your sports program, we were invited to Trinidad 2 summers ago to help with developing your sport program. Because in their minds, they want to have a champs of their own that could rival our champs here. So we went there and spent about 2 weeks there training them and sharing ideas with them in terms of the policies that govern our schools and so on. But apart from that, what I've found is that most of the persons that are coming to us are coming for, not necessarily for the higher educational aspect of it, but for specific areas. So at GC Foster, we have made it a part of our being to say to you, come to us, tell us what you want, and we'll develop something for you. Prior to the last election, we would have sent in a proposal to the powers that be, saying that those students that we have who made the finals at champs, have only one CXC, maybe no CXC, but based on the talent level, we have programs that we are structuring for them, short programs that were put in place, and stack their credential, get the CXCs, and get them certified to have an associate degree, move on to the bachelor's degree that we have in coaching and sports management. So we, because of our nature, we are physical. So we have to look at practical ways of making sure that it works.
Okay. All right, thank you. I know my time is quite limited, and I'm going to try to bowl 2 more balls. I'm going to look into the messaging section. But Ms. Boson, I need to put this question to you, and it's a question of leadership, and all of us would really and truly benefit. But in this period of uncertainty, what role should leadership play in reimagining partnerships that not only sustain our institutions, but also advance regional development?
Thank you so much, Doreen, and all the panelists who have been really bringing this conversation to some of the fundamental values that you have already touched upon when it comes to leadership. It includes transparency, it includes honesty, it includes openness. Those are very much key. I think in the space of international partnership, it's very important that each person, each entity, each organization enters into the conversation with very clear idea of what you can bring on the table to offer, as well as what is missing, what is the gap, what is the challenges from your side, so that you know what you can, in a way, play the mix and match along with each other to have this, let's say, better synergized approach altogether, where we create this win-win solution altogether. And one very important thing that I want to highlight along the line of leadership is that we have to acknowledge the leadership of the Global South. A lot of times in the work that we face, especially, let's say, if we look at the global data on how Asia and the Pacific, how Latin America and the Caribbean, and how Africa and a part of, let's say, the Arab state are interacting with each other, we understand that a lot of times it's not that you don't want to speak out, it's you just need to be comfortable enough to present what you have and knowing that you have the power to take the leadership. And let's say with the current pilot we're doing with a particular frame of coastal development within the triangular cooperation, we have, let's say, observed and supported very visible results of Global South coming together to take the leadership in making decisions and having the Global North supporting the initiatives you have and putting together. And I agree with a lot of what the panelists have already said. We don't always have to look at the North. We can also look at the West, we can also look at the East, and we can also look at the Global South as a whole. And the opportunities are out there. There are a lot of them. And one last example before I finish, in the Fourth Seas Conference last year, which takes place every 10 years, that defines where small island developing states go in the next 10 years. The United Nations Higher Education Sustainability Initiative hosted a particular session to highlight the role of higher education in it. And that specifically listed that higher education institutions and relevant stakeholders, including from the private sector, the public sector, have this role to support with research, to support with joint programs, to support with capacity building, and more importantly, to support with this connection to the industry. But those will not be achieved without small island developing state taking the leadership, because you're at the position where you know the challenges, where you know the relevant, cost-effective solutions to bring into the picture. Finances matter, but in-kind contribution, small pieces here and there all together can make huge impacts and differences all together. So with that said, thank you so much again, Doreen, and want to acknowledge once again the outstanding work that J-TEC has been leading, and we have a hopeful future and remain committed to working with Jamaica.
All right. Thank you so much. Hold your horses there. I'm going to try to squeeze in one more question. I have about 4 more minutes to wrap up, but a question that was posed in the webinar chat. The question is, how do we address the issue of mobilization of students in terms of transfer of credits to ensure that Caribbean students do not encounter challenges when they want to do further studies? Dr. Paul Wilson, I know you have some experience in this area. Quickly, in about 30 seconds, how do we overcome this challenge?
All right, again, transparency. So at the CCCJ, we dialogue with the partnering institution at the beginning because we want our learners to benefit from the experience. So there is a partnership as to what courses the students will take, how those are aligned with the curriculum that the student is doing at home and what they'll do abroad. And we agree on what the students, so when they leave knowing what is it they're expected to do and how they should perform. We also look at collaboration in developing the curriculum. So we have program development, joint program development with our partnering institutions.
All right. I have just about 3 minutes, and I'm going to give everybody just about 60 seconds, their final thoughts, their final words, their final perspectives on internationalization, starting with Miss Lily Boson.
The 60-second is simple. Can I share my screen? Because the slide was supposed to be up, but I haven't seen it. So can I quickly share my screen?
Sure. Go ahead, quickly.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. All right, we're now going to leave the room without concrete next steps. So what you're seeing here are the two barcodes for joining the United Nations South-South University Cooperation and amplify the impact and the contribution from Jamaica. If you are a university member, you can scan the barcode on the left to go through the onboarding process as a university. However, if you are a government entity, a company, a civil society organization, or in a way, if anyone here is represent a university from the global north, feel free to scan the barcode on the right. I'll have my team follow up with whoever is interested to get to know more about amplifying international cooperation from the scope of Jamaica, from Caribbean, and from small island developing state, or the global south overall. Happy to have a further conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dr. Dakers, your 60 seconds.
Thank you so much, Darren, for this time. I appreciate it. Now, today's conversation focused on internationalization, pivoting strategies, and partnership to promote internationalization, and this among the global policy. On a whole, this should be an area where all institutions are looking for and stepping into spaces to prepare to adapt to the various changes that are happening, right? And one of the areas I mentioned to you earlier that the Jamaica Diaspora Task Force Action Network is a part of is building effective partnerships, right? Building those relationships with which we as an organization is able to collaborate with institutions not only within our borders, but across borders. And as a central part of the internationalization, it allows institutions to connect globally, to look and have conversation about those high needs areas, such as food insecurity, such as climate change that was mentioned before, and to come together based on institution and their offering to see how best we're able to collaborate, how best institutions across the board can collaborate together to make sure that individuals who are going into these spaces, into these classrooms, taking these courses are equipped to be able to now come out and in the workforce be able to create those solutions and those strategical changes to make a difference in society.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dakers. Dr. Paul Wilson, your 60 seconds start now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henry. The CCCJ remains committed to providing opportunities for the advancement of quality post-secondary higher education, not only to Jamaicans, but persons in the region. We believe that education should not be a deterrent to anyone. So we have provided a space online where learners from anywhere can access our programs. We look for partnerships where our students can experience internationalization, be ready globally for the world. One challenge that we encounter, and it is real, based on where we're situated, based on our current situation in Jamaica, that has affected how we partner with institutions. I remember we attended the CCID conference, that's the Community Colleges International Development, and there was an interest in partnering with CCCJ member institutions, and one person asked, but how would you prevent my students from accessing marijuana? So there are challenges like that we need to address as a country, but we continue to look for those opportunities.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kevin Brown. Your 60 seconds, start now.
Thank you. Well, for us, internationalization is an important part of our strategy going forward. We believe that it can be a vehicle for increased research opportunities at the university and also for expanded access. And so for us, we will be working with partners across all sectors, government and otherwise, to ensure that we can increase the level of global outreach that the university has, including the continent of Africa and other nations.
All right, thank you. Mr. Davis?
At GC Foster, we will continue to adapt, create, lead, and modify ourselves so that the world will come to our doors. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. 20, not 60. 5 minutes to round it out. Professor Hewitt, you
Darren, bonus mark.
Sorry, I will use up his extra time. And for us at IUC, internationalization in education for us is just part of our identity and our vocation. We want to push that even further to expand in the area of the humanities, because government is pushing very much in the STEM area, and that we fully understand. We're of the belief that the humanity is being left behind, and that require major investment, and that can come through partnership. We're pushing for partnerships that can help us in contextual research, areas around social justice, overcoming violence, eco-green projects that require networking and exchange for curriculum development. These are vast areas that we need to invest in, not only through local partnerships, which I strongly believe in, but much more so in terms of international partnership. For private institutions that face major challenges with mobilizing funding, we therefore must breathe by reaching out, and to do so with integrity, with leadership that can literally sell Jamaica in a very positive way, in the sense that we are second to none in terms of the kind of human and other resources that we have here that can be a part of what the world is seeking for.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks to all our panelists for this rich and forward-thinking discussion. What's clear from today's exchange is that internationalization is no longer just about mobility or memorandum of understanding. It's about strategy, it's about resilience, and of course, it's about relevance. We have heard how institutions must pivot, Dr. Brown, with purpose, embrace digital tools wisely, and pursue partnerships that are not only global in scope, but are also grounded in shared values like honesty. It is also clear that the Caribbean has something very powerful to offer. Our creativity, Mr. Davis from GC Foster, our cultural capital, our ability to lead through collaboration. The challenge now is to translate these insights into policy and practice and sustained regional cooperation. I want to thank Ms. Lily Boson, Dr. Dakers, Dr. Paul Wilson, Dr. Brown, Mr. Davis, and Professor Hewitt for sharing all your perspectives, your candor and depth. We now pause very briefly for a performance by RSI Steel, after which we're going to move into the summary and action planning segment of the conference. A round of applause for RSI Steel. Awesome cultural rendition. As we near the close of today's conference, we now turn our attention to an important segment, the summary and action plan. This is where we bring together key insights, policy ideas, and perhaps practical recommendations that have emerged throughout our sessions today. To lead us in this segment is Dr. Petagay Waugh. She is the Institutional Monitoring Officer at J-TEC. Please help me welcome Dr. Waugh.
And distinguished partners, yes, we're calling ourselves partners. As we conclude this impactful internationalization conference, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to everyone who contributed to making this gathering so meaningful. Over the past few hours, we've explored how the Caribbean higher education sector can evaluate its global presence, foster regional collaboration, and harness emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and digital transformation. We began with a dynamic schedule that includes inspiring keynote addresses, insightful panel discussions, and vibrant exchanges. Professor Sir Hilary Beckles provided a compelling perspective on Caribbean higher education leadership amidst changing global policies, emphasizing our need to reimagine strategic options for the internationalization. Our panels on institutional pivoting, strategic partnerships, and policy shifts showcased innovative approaches and opportunities for regional growth. Throughout this conference, we outlined a comprehensive roadmap, immediate actions like disseminating our findings and launching practical tools, medium-term strategies such as building our regional hubs for skills, and fostering continuous dialogue and long-term visions that position the Caribbean as a cultural and innovation leader on the global stage, and we've started already. We also emphasize the importance of embedding digital skills into our curricula, establishing innovation hubs, and ensuring digital inclusion for all communities. Looking forward, the next steps are clear. We will establish a high-level regional steering committee, secure funding, and develop actionable plans with clear responsibilities and key performance indicators. This coordinated effort will ensure our strategies are effective, adaptable, and sustainable. In closing, I want to reaffirm that the future of Caribbean higher education depends on our collective resolve, collaboration, and innovation. Together, we can build a resilient, inclusive, and global competitive ecosystem that benefits our societies and shapes our region's narrative on the world stage. Thank you for your dedicated partnership and vision. The Jamaica Tertiary Education Commission looks forward to working with all higher education institutions as we turn these strategies into impactful realities. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Waugh. And to bring the curtains officially down on the conference, I'm going to be inviting Miss Anthea Thompson, NQF officer, to move the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for receiving me. A pleasant good afternoon to our in-person guests and those joining us virtually. Thank you, first of all, for accepting J-TEC's invitation to participate in this crucial and dynamic topic of advancing the internationalization of higher education. To our keynote speaker, Professor Hilary Beckles, we thank him for leading us off in our discussions today. His presentation was, I'm sure, well received and very in-depth. He posited to us the various stages and transitions of internationalization in Jamaica and the Caribbean, and of note, he left us with the charge that we must be committed, we must know our roots to chart the course on our internationalization journey. So we thank him for his involvement and presentation today. To our panelists, tremendous gratitude for your participation, your insights, and most of all, your candid sharing of your knowledge, experiences, and recommendations. Our first panel, I should say, although it was affected by a few absences, the discussions were not disadvantaged as the information shared through our moderator, PVC Maynard, and Ms. Christina Williams was well received again, quite in-depth and thought-provoking. The members of panel 2, more numerous, but thank you again because you engaged our audiences. You shared candidly the experiences of the institutions to which you are associated. We appreciate the fact that the discussion led us not just to view the topic at the depth of what it was, but the fact that your engagement helped us to see within the institutions in which you operate, and our moderator, Dr. Darian Henry, led your discussions and pulled out from you all that you had to share with us. I would like to say a special thank you to the planning committee of this conference, the Internationalization Planning Committee. We thank you for your engagement, which started months ago, your guidance, your suggestions and input was well received. The execution of today and for events to come, which is our main conference for next year, we will bring information for internationalization from this point and, build on them and effect them as we go along. Thanks to our committee chair, Mr. Franklin Bennett, other members of our committee, and let me name a few, Professor Haldane, try and name all. Professor Haldane Morris, Dr. Marcia Roamonde, Professor Shermaine Barrett, PVC Sandria Maynard, Jason McIntosh, Jordan Williams, Dr. Sharika Dakers. Those are our external members, and I want to thank them so much because they have led the charge of giving not just information, but guidance, suggestions to what we have delivered today. To our J-TEC team, to our Executive Commissioner, Dr. Damian Black, the additional J-TEC team of Mrs. Tracy Ann Smith, Mrs. Norda Seymour Hall, Mrs. Latoya Sams Blackwood, Mr. Evan Granston, Ms. Sydney Graham, Dr. Petagay Waugh. We thank you for your involvement with the committee, the planning, and the execution. I would like to not close without thanking other contributing members for their involvement in today's activities. To our host, the UWI, who gave us venue to host today's activities. We thank them for their partnership and their contribution for today. Our technical team, we thank you for effectively delivering this conference, both online and accommodating the transitions for the on-site guests. So thank you very much. I hope that the discussions today will not end here, but they will continue, that they will grow, that they will benefit future activities, both within our institutions and the collaborations that they are expected to bring. I thank you for your engagement today, and without saying thank you to God for today's blessed day, His guidance, and His delivery of all that needed to be inputted to get today's activities off, running, and executed, we thank Him, and we continue to tread. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That is it. Do have a pleasant afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.